the headline of what I want to go through with you today is that certain changes start from us as people, and they start in the inside. And I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on that in a bit. But before we go into what mindfulness and digital life and the digital era has to do with each other, let's start with a little practice. So take away everything that you have on your chair or anything. Bring both of your feet onto the floor and close your eyes. And start with taking 3 very deep breaths. Deeply in through your nose and out through your mouth. Deeply in through your nose, out through your mouth. And even if you hear noises around it, come back to noticing your breath. And now bring your attention to your feet on the floor. Notice the connection from your feet to the floor. Notice the area of your body that touches the chair, or if you're standing or leaning. And how is it for you to be here right now? What is your intention for today? And how do you want to show up? What kind of person do you want to be today? Bring your attention back to your breath. Take one more deep inhale. And open your eyes. What we have just done, we called it mindful meetings when I was still at Google, and we did it actually before we started every meeting. And it made the quality of meetings so much better. It's a great way of actually arriving, calling it the minute to arrive, taking the time to actually really arrive somewhere. So this is me. My name is Mooney. And when I was still this little girl, I think I was 6 years old back then, I had a really interesting picture of how this world will be and what I'm going to do in this world and how fun it's going to be playing with friends. And then I started going into the university and studying. And at one point in my business life, I had like this really corporate career. I actually never wanted to, but it always ended up happening. And so I worked for BMW and for Red Bull, actually in Formula One, so car industry is familiar to me. And then I switched to soccer at Red Bull, and then I started working for Google. I was the spokesperson for YouTube for many years, and then I headed up the YouTube Academy in Berlin, which is a creative space for YouTube creators. And so I had like 2 questions in this whole time that would not let me sleep at nights. And one was, how can I fully show up exactly as the person that I want to be? And the second question was, how do I deal with all these tasks that I have every day? Right? And I felt overwhelmed at times with so many things that were going on. I was one of those people who, when I started with working, actually, I was inbox 0 person, right? I wouldn't leave the office until my inbox was 0. Today, I'm one of those people who has hundreds of unread emails, and I know I won't ever read all of them, right? But that was, like, for me, a real progress, a real process to actually be okay to not be able to read all of these emails or to make my to-do list an inbox, and instead concentrating again on what I wanted to actually do. Who knows that feeling that sometimes we're just going into the office and the day goes by, and at the end of the day, we're like, oh, I haven't done anything that I actually wanted to do. And what I recognized over the years, the overwhelm became more for me. I felt like things are just getting more and more overwhelming. And I felt really alone with this, so I never told anyone, because I felt like if I tell anyone, they will say, oh, she can't deal with it. And I never wanted to hear that. I wanted to just say, I can deal with this. But at one point I felt like I really need to talk about this. So I started with a little group telling them how overwhelmed I felt, and I found out everyone in this group felt the same. So I was like wondering, why is that, and why is no one talking about it? And I was also wondering, what can I do with this overwhelm? And I found mindfulness as a real great practice for me to actually work with it differently. And I also started to share this with my colleagues, and I found they had an amazing way of dealing with it too. I also found, then I started talking about it, you know, within the whole Google company, but then also outside of the company, wherever I go, people write me emails saying like, I've listened to your podcast, and thank you so much for saying this. I feel exactly the same, but I have no one to talk to in my company about that. And luckily, in the meanwhile, I can say, actually, yes, I know 3 people in your company who I can connect you with, because they wrote me exactly the same thing. So wherever I go, I meet more and more people, because it's not about we can't deal with it. It is actually a phenomenon of the actual time. This is something that is not just a trend. Our time is getting faster. It's basically a VUCA world, and some of you might have heard this term already, and it actually comes from the military, and it describes that specific war moment. You know, when there's war, that's VUCA world. Means you don't know what's gonna happen, you don't know what the solution is. You have to act with your own instinct and just really do things. And this term is being used by business world so much lately. So there has to be something, right? Why do we feel in business that we are like in a war moment? Because it's the same thing. We don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. The Industrial Revolution is kicking off. The 4th Industrial Revolution will do things we can't even imagine, or maybe we saw them in movies, but we never thought it's going to happen in our lifetime. And there's so much around this. So it's not only the fastness and the complexity, but we also never really know what a problem is and what the one solution for the problem is, because there's so many solutions for it. And also, it scares the shit out of us. It's scary to not know what's going to happen. People want to know what's going to happen. We're humans. We want to have a predictable world. And yeah, there's a cultural change that is also going on, and many of you might have noticed this at Daimler. You know, it's like we need to shift certain things, but how do we do this, and what parts of the culture need to shift? And I want to introduce you to a study that has been done at Google. They have researched for multiple years what their outstanding teams were. They looked into why is this team more outstanding than all the others, and they looked at all the teams that were outstanding, and what they found surprised them themselves, and they didn't even have a term for it. But the number one factor for all the outstanding teams was called psychological safety. And by the way, this study is online at Rework, so you can look it up. So psychological safety seemed to have been the number one factor for the teams to be better than every other team. And people who described psychological safety said things like, I could make mistakes and it was okay to do them. I could be myself and express my opinion, even if this was a controversial one, without feeling that I can't do it. I can just be myself, no matter how I am. And it really blew my mind to hear that. And that's obviously something that is also an important factor, part of a culture, right? Psychological safety is an important cultural factor. And also, with the digital time, it becomes even more important because we don't feel so safe anymore. And then there's this purpose, and it's really about, so studies show more and more that people look for purpose, and the purpose is ideally not only something that has to do with maximizing revenue for a company, but what is the wider purpose of it? Why are we doing these things? People ask these questions more and more. And also, we ask the questions for ourselves, right? What is the purpose? Why am I here on Earth? And maybe that makes it so hard to be a human, because animals don't ask that questions, right? But we humans can ask that question. And in the back of our mind, we always want to know, why are we doing certain things? Why are we here? What's our purpose? What's the purpose for a company? So it's about leadership as well. Leadership is going to shift as well, and I see it as a shift from I to we. So leadership is becoming more like leading in a servant style, and more people wish to also be able to lead, even if they are not in a leadership position. And I would call that compassionate leadership, because I really like that it's a very servant style. So the leader steps into a more service-oriented position, where obviously the leader can, for example, create psychological safety and really make sure that the people in his team feel safe about whatever it is. And I mean, it is a different leadership style, but it has a lot of amazing ways of implementing it. One thing, because I'm experimenting with this a lot, I've been a leader myself for many years, I've experimented with compassionate leadership, and people would tell to me, yeah, but then you are just going to be weak and you're not going to make tough decisions, and that's not working. But I figured it's not about that. As a compassionate leader, a tough decision is still important. We still need to make them. But the question is, what is my intention behind it? And is the intention behind it a servant intention? What is the best for the team? And if that's my intention, I can make tough decisions. And actually, compassionate leadership sometimes even needs more courage. It needs the courage to be okay with uncomfortable feelings, and to understand that the team feels uncomfortable too, and not close my eyes from that, but really deeply go into this. I can elaborate on that a lot longer. But my main thing is really that we also need different skills for this digital time, right? The skills that we learned at school, they don't work anymore in this digital life. And as far as it concerns me and many people that I meet, no one really told us how to deal with it. No one really told us, how do we deal with emails coming in constantly? How do we work with the fast-moving world? How do we deal with unpredictability, and so on and so on? The good thing is, it's a skill that we can learn, like learning how to use a computer. It's no rocket science, but we don't really spend time right now to do that. And the World Economic Forum has published a study. It's also online. Actually, this is where you find the source. And they looked into the skill sets that we need in 2020. And since I heard 2020 is so important for Daimler, lucky me, I have this number too here. And it turns out that the skills that we felt in 2015 were the most important skills for people to have will be shifting tremendously in 2020. And one of the skills that is, for example, in the top 6 is emotional intelligence. I will elaborate on this later on. Jack Ma says that actually we need to concentrate much more on those skills that machines cannot do, because all the skills that machines can do, we don't have to do them. He says we need to teach arts for school people. So what to do? What is the solution for it? And one is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence gives us a huge variety of skill sets. For example, self-awareness, so understanding ourselves better. Self-regulation, so we can actually literally make a step back in our head to understand how we deal with certain situations. It has to do with motivation, so what motivates me to go to work every day. Empathy, and empathy is not only putting myself into other people's shoes, but more importantly, and that was for me really tremendous, understanding when emotions that I pick up are not mine. Yeah, when I'm not stressed and I go into a room where everyone is stressed, I'm picking up on that because we are hardwired as humans to do that. So understanding in such a moment, oh, actually that's not mine, I'm feeling totally okay, that's just something I pick up, is a skill that we need to learn even more nowadays. And then social skills, so to really like deal with difficult conversations, have conversations with people and work with them differently. And I also really think integrity and authenticity are becoming skills that are even more important because, at least that is my experience, integrity is an amazing word and I love it, but in this fast-moving world, when things have to be getting done, it's sometimes really hard to stay in our own integrity or to be super authentic to how we want to show up. It's sometimes a real thing to get back into what would be authentic for me right now, and can I actually be that? And it's resilience. I would say resilience is the most important one because things are changing like hell. And there's moments again and again in the meanwhile every day when we have this feeling like, ah! So how do we deal with this and how do we learn the skills? And actually, obviously, my answer is mindfulness. Mindfulness is an amazing way to train these skills. And when amazing brain scientists look into the brain right now, and there's so much proof out there that actually mindfulness can create and establish these areas in our brain that are important for emotion regulation and also letting our emotional part of the brain and the thinking of the part of the brain connect and have a higher bandwidth to talk with each other. And for me, mindfulness is really this going out of autopilot, right? It's not nothing spiritual. It's for me this making a step back in my head instead of just running, going out of reactive mode into what is it that I really actually want to do? What is the person that I want to be? And if you know Matrix, it's this bullet moment when these bullets come in front of him and he's like, oh, wait a second, I'm in the Matrix. And he can only do that because he literally makes a step back in his head saying, what is actually happening here? And this is actually helping him to make the step back. And there's 3 ways of going into dealing with it. So first we have to develop inner calm. And then we have to understand our emotions and our thoughts. So these 3 factors are part of being mindful. So not only the machines have to go into evolution, but I think it's also the humans that go into evolution. If you know Noah Harari, he talks about how the machines are gonna kill all the jobs. And it could feel like, oh fuck, that's really scary, but there's another way to see it. Wow, it's amazing. We will have so much more time, and we will have so much more time to work on the things that we actually want to work, the human and the humanity, and to really work into making this world a real better place. And another thing, Mo, former business officer of Google X, he actually says the machines will learn from us. The machines will learn from us as humans, and whatever we will show them, they will copy. So our values will become so much more important, and also our humanity. And so if you ask me, the biggest transformation, the biggest trend of this digital transformation is to go back into focusing on human-centeredness and getting into our heart wisdom again. Not letting our heart outside of the office, but bringing it in, being a full human with all that we have. So let's rethink the way we do business and maybe even start a movement. Yes, in time, yes? Thank you.